The first thing the old woman noticed was the way the janitor smiled. Not the polite kind people give when they feel obligated. Not the distracted smile people offer while glancing at their phones. This one was different. It was warm, genuine, and directed straight at her. For a moment, Margaret Whitmore froze in the middle of the hospital corridor, her hand resting lightly on the polished silver handle of her cane. Most people didn't smile at her anymore. Most people simply saw an old woman, moving slowly through the halls and stepped around her. Others spoke to her with exaggerated lips, assuming she might read them. Some tried shouting. But Margaret Whitmore heard nothing. She had lived in silence for 73 years. The world had always been a quiet place for her, but silence had never meant loneliness. Not until recently. Her 3 grandchildren, Oliver, Olivia, and Owen, walked beside her that afternoon, speaking rapidly to each other as they followed the hospital administrator through the long corridor. They were the famous Whitmore triplets, young, brilliant, and newly in charge of Whitmore Industries, one of the largest technology companies in the country. Reporters followed them everywhere. Investors hung on their every word. But right now, none of that mattered, because their grandmother had insisted on visiting the hospital their company had recently funded. She wanted to see where the money had gone. More importantly, she wanted to see the people. The administrator kept talking, gesturing toward new equipment and renovated wings. The triplets nodded politely. Margaret simply watched. And then she saw him. At the far end of the corridor, pushing a quiet cleaning cart, was a tall man wearing faded blue scrubs and worn work boots. His name tag read Daniel Carter. He moved slowly as he mopped the floor, careful around the edges of the hallway where patients walked. There was something gentle about the way he worked, something patient, something kind. Most people walked right past him without noticing. But when Daniel looked up and saw Margaret standing there, he stopped. Their eyes met. And then something unexpected happened. Daniel placed the mop against the cart, wiped his hands on a small towel, and raised both of his hands in the air. His fingers moved gracefully, deliberately. Hello. The sign was clear, perfect. Margaret's eyes widened. Her heart skipped. It had been years since a stranger greeted her in sign language. Years. Most people didn't bother to learn it. Even some members of her own family struggled. But this janitor, this quiet man in work, Boots, had just welcomed her into the room in her own language. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she responded. Hello, nice to meet you. The administrator stopped talking mid-sentence. The triplets turned. Oliver blinked. Olivia frowned slightly. Owen tilted his head. None of them understood sign language, but they could clearly see that something important was happening. Daniel smiled again. A soft, respectful smile. Welcome to the hospital, he signed. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears, the other kind. The ones that appear when someone does something unexpectedly kind. She signed slowly. You know sign language? Daniel nodded. Yes. His hands moved again. My daughter is deaf. Margaret inhaled sharply. Suddenly everything made sense. Love. That was how people learned. Not out of obligation, but out of love. She asked gently. How old is she? Daniel's fingers moved. 8. Margaret smiled, a wide smile that lit her entire face. Behind her, the Whitmore triplets watched silently, curiosity growing. Oliver whispered to the administrator. What are they saying? The administrator shrugged helplessly. I have no idea. Meanwhile, Margaret and Daniel continued their quiet conversation in the middle of the hallway, while hospital staff walked around them. Do you work here full-time? Margaret asked. Daniel nodded. Night shifts mostly. Then he hesitated, as if debating whether to say something more. Margaret waited patiently. Finally he signed again. I'm a single dad. My daughter waits for me to come home every morning before school. Margaret felt something twist inside her chest. She understood that life. The quiet sacrifices, the invisible struggles. She studied him carefully now. The tired eyes, the calloused hands, the determination hidden beneath the gentle smile. And suddenly she realized something else. This man wasn't just kind. He was exhausted, but still standing, still smiling, still greeting strangers with warmth. She asked softly, What is your daughter's name? Daniel's face brightened instantly. Emma. He signed the name with pride. Margaret laughed silently, delighted. Emma. Beautiful name. Daniel nodded. She's the best thing in my life. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them was comfortable, natural. Behind them, the Whitmore triplets were still watching, but now something had changed. Their curiosity had turned into something deeper, respect. Because even though they couldn't understand the words, they could understand the emotion. Finally, Oliver stepped forward slightly and asked quietly, "Grandma, what's happening?" Margaret turned toward them. Her eyes were shining. She lifted her hands and began signing slowly. Oliver, Olivia, and Owen had seen their grandmother sign before, but this time felt different. She wasn't just communicating, she was telling a story. The administrator quickly pulled out a phone and began typing a translation app, so the triplets could follow. Grandma says the janitor learned sign language for his daughter. The triplets exchanged glances. That alone impressed them. But Margaret continued signing. The phone translated again. He works nights. He raises his daughter alone. He greets strangers kindly, even when nobody notices him. Now the hallway had grown quiet. Even nurses nearby paused for a moment, because everyone could feel it. Something meaningful was happening. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to attention. He tried to return to his cleaning cart, but Margaret gently touched his arm. "Wait," she signed again. "Your daughter must be proud of you." Daniel swallowed hard. For a moment he couldn't respond. Then finally he signed back. "I hope so." Margaret looked at the triplets again. Her hands moved with more urgency now. The translation appeared on the phone. "People like him are the reason the world still works. Not CEOs, not billionaires. People who show kindness when nobody is watching." Oliver felt his throat tighten. Olivia looked down at the floor. Owen exhaled slowly, because in that moment they realized something uncomfortable. Their company funded the hospital. Their name was on the building, but they had never once spoken to the people who kept it running. Not the cleaners, not the janitors, not the night staff. And here was their grandmother, talking to one of them like he mattered. Because he did. Margaret turned back to Daniel and signed one last thing. "Thank you for saying hello." Daniel smiled again. "Any time." And then something unexpected happened. Olivia stepped forward. She looked at Daniel and awkwardly raised her hands. Her fingers moved clumsily. "Hello." The sign wasn't perfect, but it was recognizable. Daniel blinked in surprise. Then he smiled wider than before. "Hello." Oliver tried next. His sign was worse, but sincere. Owen laughed nervously and attempted it too. The hallway filled with quiet laughter. And for the first time that afternoon, the billionaire triplets looked completely speechless, not because they didn't know what to say, but because a single father pushing a janitor's cart had just reminded them of something they had forgotten: humanity. And sometimes that lesson comes from the most unexpected people.